You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dmitri. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the PR and marketing firm that specializes in music innovation. Today, I chat with Drew Thurlow, a strategist focused on how AI might be democratizing the music industry rather than destroying it. We talk about how AI is changing everything from the creative process to copyright law, whether or not we should be worried about AI-generated music like the Velvet Sundown, and how AI is being used to surface the most popular songs made by whales in the sea. We also talk about this former Sony, Warner, and Pandora exec's upcoming new book, Machine Music, how AI is transforming music's next act that's set for release in 2026. Drew will definitely have you thinking new thoughts today. But first, the news.
Rock, paper, scanner.
Hello. Welcome to the Rock Paper Scanner. I'm Eleanor Rust. You may have heard me before, and I am turning the tables on Dmitri and asking him about the news. Hey, what are you scanning this week, Dmitri?
I've got a few articles, and the way I was thinking about it to talk to you today is they almost tell a story across them, which is one of the things I love about this when we're news scanning. It's like any individual article is a piece of news or a thought content to get you thinking, but when you start to see the patterns, it starts to tell a story about what's emerging in the industry. So the first one is very newsy. I'm pulling this from Murray Stason at Music Business Worldwide. Top U.S. copyright official Shira Perlmutter reinstated as appeals court blocks firing by Trump. I'm sure most Music Tectonics listeners were aware that alongside when Trump was just firing everybody from all sorts of federal and non-federal agencies doing whatever he pleased, Shira Perlmutter, along with the head of the Library of Congress, got booted, ironically, or maybe not so ironically, the day after Perlmutter released a report on AI and fair use and things like that. So the injunction pending appeal filed September 10th temporarily reinstates Perlmutter and prevents the Trump administration from installing executive branch officials to run the Library of Congress and the Copyright Office. So yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that I think our listeners will be especially interested in is how the Copyright Office is involved in performance rights organizations and regulations on things like the Mechanical Licensing Collective. It might seem like a little part of the Library of Congress, except that it's got its fingers in all of the things that the music industry works on.
Exactly. And, the other thing that was interesting about all this was sort of the way it got reported. There was implications that this was in direct response to the AI reporting, and it was around the same time that Elon Musk was involved with, and kind of this shift over to tech leaders having this political control. So it's unclear whether that actually was the case, but it certainly was an issue that popped up. So it kind of paints a picture for this continuing political dynamic that has to do with what kind of policy and societal norms there'll be around AI training and use of AI. Which leads us to our second article, which is an Engadget piece by Will Shanklin. Reddit, Yahoo, Medium, and more are adopting a new licensing standard to get compensated for AI scraping. And it talks about a new, quote, really simple licensing, RSL standard, that creates terms that participants expect AI companies to abide by. So in a way, it's this language underneath HTML where when somebody's scraping data, it gives instructions on what the licensing terms are for AI, which, this one is not directly music based. It's about just internet content as a whole. But the article also says that they're launching this nonprofit, the RSL Collective, that views itself as equivalent of nonprofits like ASCAP and BMI, which manage music industry royalties. The new group says its standard can establish fair market prices and strengthen negotiation leverage for all publishers.
It's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of, it feels like the best of the open internet to me, kind of like Creative Commons licensing was attempting to be, except that it's through this little technical thing called the robots text that you're mentioning that lives under the HTML. We should remember that the AI companies aren't always paying attention to the robots text. You can ignore it.
Well, they might be paying attention, but ignoring it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not following its instructions as well.
I mean, it sounds like RSL is hoping this is much more legally enforceable, as well as possibly more technically enforceable via some of the cloud companies that host the web traffic.
It's certainly a creative, simple solution, at least mechanically or technically or logistically. Whether, psychologically is another question. But, like what was interesting about the Copyright Office is, and actually that report was meant to be a preliminary report. It wasn't. It was almost like in draft form the day before she got fired, the day before she got rehired by the courts. No, I mean, actually several months before that. But what's interesting is the report was basically saying, let's let the free market play out. That copyright law already protects these things, so let's keep these policies in place. Let's not change them. And let's let people figure out how to make this licensing work. So in a way, these tech companies or these media platforms are saying, here's how this could actually work. So at least there's a map. Now, on the other side, in terms of user data, another really interesting article came out from Ars Technica. Spotify peeved after 10,000 users sold data to build AI tools. Spotify sent a warning to stop data sales, but developers say they never got it. This article was by Ashley Bellinger on September 10th. And so what's happened is there's an entity called Unwrapped, which is a playoff of Spotify Wrapped, that is allowing people to somehow transfer their Spotify listening data and sell it to AI companies. So in a way, it's part of this movement of users can own their own data, but then it's also users can monetize their data. They're not getting paid much. It's some kind of cryptocurrency, and it's the equivalent of $5. It's not a lot. And even the founder of Unwrapped is like, we really would like it to be 100 times that much. But the point is, it also means that through this loophole of user data protection, some other company is getting insights into music discovery on Spotify. So it's a really interesting, weird twist of things. On the one hand, user data control is at issue, but on the other hand, Spotify's like, wait a second, I know that's user data, but also they got it because we made recommendations, we created a platform where you could find and sort music, etc.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a weird, interesting story that's on the user data side. Yeah.
What's the next chapter in your story?
So the next chapter, the final chapter, is a piece that, by the way, all these articles are in the Rock Paper Scanner newsletter and email. So you should have gotten this last Friday, so you can look through and see all those articles. And if you're not signed up, you should sign up. This is literally an outlet I've never seen before. It's called shopblack.us, SHOPPE. And the title of the article is Synthetic Stars Are Here, Why the Future Belongs to Content Architects. The creator era is ending, at least in the way we've known it. Creators aren't just competing with each other anymore. They're competing with the platforms themselves. Spotify has already, now this is interesting, Spotify has already experimented with AI-generated bands. YouTube is building AI-powered video tools, and TikTok's algorithm can just as easily amplify synthetic influencers as human ones. And so what they're saying is the platforms that you think are empowering you to share content out there in the world are also competing with you. And as a creator, and of course this is coming from a Black perspective in the sense of there's been so much co-optation and use of things that have been created by Black creators in music and in other dance, in other forms, etc. They're saying, but I think this applies to creators across the board. This does not have to be to any particular group. But as a creator, if you want to start thinking about how to really have a career, monetize, own your IP, etc., you have to move from being an individual creator to being a content architect. The idea is an architect is orchestrating freelancers and collaborators and AI systems to make this scalable content. They basically have to say, if the platforms are co-opting us, we have to co-opt the platforms. And in particular, to me, it points to a sense of like, really understanding that what you create should be treated as intellectual property. Don't just create it once and put it out there for everybody else to monetize. Create it with a plan to really scale it.
And it sounds like there's a focus on community, right? That you build a community that's co-creating, that's building tools with you rather than, I don't know, I guess I think of Mr. Beast, who's been trying to leverage so many different kinds of content creation in lots of different spaces to mixed effects. But that's a case where it's one person at the head of that. But if you're really trying to build a community around that sounds really interesting. And it's interesting in connection to the last story where we're seeing users try and pool their resources. I see a line in that article that it's like a labor union.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about both of these moves,
a data
being
union.
creator, being content architects, owning your user data, as unionizing, right? As pooling resources as either users or creators. That's really powerful.
Eleanor, I think that's the point of looking at all these articles together. You start to see something is shifting bigger than any individual story, right? And so what I see you saying is is that one of the shifts that's happening here is as AI and platforms start to utilize data and users and content and creation in a new sort of way, it shifts the values across the entire ecosystem. And so users are starting to see a different kind of value in what they have to offer. Creators have something else to offer. And I feel my brain like twisting. It's like a kaleidoscope when we talk about all those stories where I'm like, oh, wow, that's all. It just reminds me of the innovator's dilemma where everything is shifting. You know, like you can't assume that the way to make money is through music streaming because now there's this other thing that's happening. And interesting that Shop Black article specifically almost implies that Velvet Sundown was a creation of Spotify, which I've never heard anybody say, but it sort of implies that.
Yeah. Even if that was not true, there's so much evidence for the platforms turning to AI content creation. They didn't mention in that article Meta, but the Meta higher ups have been imagining a Facebook where you're not interacting with human posts at all. They're trying to do an end run around the human creator that they can't control. And like envisioning a world in which you're interacting entirely with AI. I know.
I mean, it's already happening. Everyone's using ChatGPT not only for helping them with their resume or their business or their subject lines, but also as friends and as therapists. It's like, wait, you're going to lose some human oomph that you just can't get. One other thing on that Shop Black that's kind of similar to what you're saying, that Shop Black article, is they talk about platforms competing like Amazon in the same way that Amazon created this platform where all these individual retailers could reach a vast national market and get all these efficiencies and sell more and da-da-da-da. But then they started selling Amazon Basics. So those products that Amazon actually either manufactures or white labels where they get a bigger profit margin from every individual sell, they're all of a sudden they're competing with the same people who built up their marketplace. Oh, it's like eBay or it's like an open market where anybody can show up. And then it's like, wait a second, this feels more and more like Walmart.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are the articles I have, Eleanor. Thanks for asking me about them.
Thank you for connecting the dots between all these stories today. I'm definitely leaving with a different perspective.
That's the fun stuff right there. All right, let's do this again soon.
Let's do it.
Music Tectonics is only 6 weeks away, and we're so excited to be back on the beach in Santa Monica with the music tech community. Now's the time to get your travel plans locked in and secure your badge. Head over to musictectonics.com/conference to get your badge and learn more.
Now for our feature interview.
I have with me here Drew Thurlow. He's a former professional musician turned music executive and strategist. He served as senior vice president of A&R at Sony Music. He's a current strategic advisor to the music tech investment fund, Mindset Music, and he's held leadership roles at both Pandora and Warner Music. A graduate of Brown University with a master's in technology and leadership. I'm jealous. That sounds cool. His writing has appeared in Billboard, and he remains a sought-after voice on the intersection of music, tech, and innovation. And his first book, Machine Music: How AI is Transforming Music's Next Act, will be published by Routledge in 2026. So I'm excited to have you here, Drew.
I am excited to be here. Longtime fan and friend of all things rock, paper, scissors, and music tech.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's exciting to have you. And since you're working on this book, I'm glad we're going to talk to you about a bunch of AI stuff. And I think we could start pretty broad and start to narrow in. I understand you also teach AI mastermind classes as well, like on a consulting basis with universities, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I started my own company a couple years ago when I left Sony, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to be specifically doing. It coincided with this AI revolution, and people just started asking me about it. And then I wrote a series for Billboard about it. And I got this book deal and I wrote this book. And so a lot of people have been asking me. So I do have this masterclass that I've been doing for university programs, but also for private companies and individuals, just a state of AI. What do you need to know? How can you integrate some of this tech into your workflow and do so ethically? And where are we going to be going from here? There's a lot to keep up on.
Yeah, cool. Well, sometimes you may walk into a corporate environment or something where one person is all hot on AI, but they want their executive team or something to kind of get caught up on something. When they ask, like, why is all this AI happening now? How do you respond?
Yeah, it isn't it funny how it just exploded in our lives? And the demarcation line really is in October of 21 when ChatGPT launched and became this ever immediate presence. And I immediately saw that it was going to be a very big deal in music and have a lot of impacts on the music space. So it really is a confluence of all these factors. I mean, AI as a term was coined in the late 50s. Machine learning has been around since at least as long. There has been other research and development in AI over the last several decades, but just like a lot of emerging tech, it kind of started in research labs and it started in academia, and then it would have fits and starts into the public. And then it was really a confluence of NVIDIA making these really powerful chips. It's a confluence of machine learning algorithms being able to run in the way that they need to process this crazy amount of data. And then we also, in the music and tech spaces, we've had a lot of layoffs, a lot of people out of work, a lot with skills and talent. So now we have this incredibly vibrant startup community, and specifically in music tech as well. I'm tracking more than 750 music tech startups, and that's 750. And we're just a lot of people who have got skills out of work. So it would just relate itself into this like really great ecosystem we have now.
Wait, so are you saying like the growth of the music tech ecosystem in terms of startups, you think is a direct result of people who got laid off and then started their own thing?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we have so many startups now. If you talk to founders from 20 years ago, the kind of challenges they had are not what we have today. Like, I have this great idea, but I don't know anyone who can build it. I don't know any engineers or coders. And that's, in the era of vibe coding, everyone can get dev work done. And then, I have this great idea and my cousin can build it, but I can't afford to host it. And these days, cloud storage is essentially free or close to it. So what the democratization of the way people record and write music with DAWs, we're kind of seeing that with startups. Like, it's easy to get a startup. You can get an idea up in an hour and vibe code it on base 44 or something and then host it on any one of the sites. And so you have a lot of people with a lot of startups, and they're 750 is a lot, and they're clearly not all credible. And the vast majority of them anyway aren't going to go anywhere. But it's interesting to see the patterns of what founders are trying to solve and where the capital is flowing. And the plurality of them are using AI. So it's really has a huge mark on the scene.
Yeah, in a way, what I'm hearing you say is like this technology and elements or versions of this technology have been around for 50, 60, 70 years in some ways, obviously developing. It's kind of like Moore's Law used to have something to do with the cost of memory or the speed.
Every 18 months, the cost of storage would double.
Yeah.
Or the amount of storage you could get for the same cost would double.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's having this exponential impact, I think, with all the AI. But in some ways, what I hear you saying is that the interfaces for AI have reached the masses. Like, you used to have to be a PhD level researcher to even do anything with artificial intelligence. But now there's these layers of interface on top, mostly in the form of chatbots for starters. Yeah. That has just made it accessible to everyone else. So that's...
Yeah, it's true. And we're in the early days of AI, at least as a consumer tool. And now we're seeing these agentic platforms start to, and I come across people who still have not yet been able to use or play with or don't know what an agentic AI platform is. But chatbot is something that you can interface with and it gives you information. An agentic AI system is one that is an agent and it can actually make decisions for you and do things for you. So in a music context, you can run your recording through Isotope's Ozone, which is an AI-powered mastering program. It's great. It's been around for a long time, at least 8 years. But now you have these agentic platforms, which are your kind of co-pilot in your writing and recording process. And then there's all these different kinds of implications that it's being used on the industry and business side too. But this is at the very first time that we've actually had access to AI on a consumer level, but it's just going to get bigger and more impactful in what we're doing.
Let's dive into that. You brought up the recording process, the composing and recording process. What other ways do you see AI transforming those creative elements of the music business?
Yeah, in some ways, it's a little bit of a continuation of what we're already seeing. I was a session musician 20 years ago, and I came up in an era where in order to write music, you had to kind of get in a garage with other musicians and compose that old-fashioned way. And then if you wanted to make a commercial-grade recording, you had to go to a studio, which was expensive for someone who was making all their money mowing lawns in Rhode Island. So it's been really interesting to see how the digital audio workstation phenomenon has really lowered the barrier for commercial-grade recording. And now everyone who buys a MacBook or an iPad gets GarageBand for free and they can make music. Well, that's an example of digital technology lowering the barrier of writing and composing and recording. And now AI is just furthering that same phenomenon. So there's all different kinds of generative features. And I don't mean just Suno and Udio, but other kinds of generative features. Logic Pro, the most popular digital audio workstation that is used by really professional grade recordings, has generative bass, keyboard, and drum tracks right in their DAW now as a plugin. So if you're a composer writing and recording, you can use AI to help give you some ideas and it can end up in the final mix. And then of course, people are using large language models to write lyrics. And there are some actual music-centric ones that are designed for like music, lyrics, and poetry. And then the writing and then the mixing and mastering process there's AI powered mixing where you can get like a reference mix with some machine learning technology. It's not great. If you're trying to make a great recording, you still need a mixing engineer to clean it up, but it can get you 80% of the way there. And then same thing with mastering. And all this stuff can be done in right in one platform, where even a few years ago, you would have to write in one area and then you have to record it in a DAW. Then you have to export that track to a mixing engineer, have them mix it. And then they would send it to a mastering engineer. And then that mastering engineer would send it to you or your label, your distributor. But all that value chain now can just be done like in one platform. And AI really makes it a lot cheaper and easier.
I think some of the concerns in the music industry around what you're talking about, the creative process and how AI is taking over, and you said, we don't need to talk about Suno and Udio to talk about how it's impacting composing and recording we had a responsible AI summit a couple months ago and a few artists showed up and one of them said, I'm actually a pretty successful jazz saxophone player and I have millions and millions of streams. I'm making a living at this, but I see what's going to happen is all this AI created music is going to flood the market even more. And it's just going to make it harder for musicians like me who play an instrument to make a living. So I guess the examples you gave are that type of musician, right? The saxophone player who's probably using a DAW at some point to record and using other technology, possibly effects, possibly even just reverb, or whatever. And depending on what other genres he would get into. But I think the other side is, are we creating a new generation of creative people? Maybe you don't call them musicians or artists because they're using chatbots to create things in generative AI projects rather than learning how to technically play an instrument or learning any music theory or harmony or songwriting or whatever. I guess I wonder, what's your take on sort of will there be a generative AI class of artists that is separate and how will that impact the music industry?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. First of all, the person who is a jazz musician making a living, making jazz music, he's worried about AI music flooding the market. I get the concern. I really do. And being a musician is hard. And especially an independent musician is really hard. It's hard to scale. There's a lot of competition. But nothing drives me more insane than the Velvet Sundown phenomenon of a couple months ago.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy. I think the music industry is looking for this narrative that generative AI is taking mind share away from real artists. And if you look at the data, we have more than 2 years of generative AI now flooding the market in the ecosystem. And there's more than 10 million generative AI songs now on DSPs. It's not most of them, but it's a measurable percentage of the 250 million songs out there. Soon to be at least somewhere between 5 and 10% now are generative AI. That will go up. All of that music, according to research done by Spotify and Deezer, it's 1/3% of the royalty pool. Fans are not listening to this stuff. They don't like it. The people's relationships to their art that they love and the music they love is so much deeper than just the audio they hear. And I feel like this Velvet Sundown, they have 1 million streams now. Everyone's curious. Everyone's going to check this out. Of the 1.7 trillion on-demand streams that are going to happen in the world in 2025, it is a rounding error of that generative AI. Now, that could change, but I say to the artists, and I gave a talk at Berkeley a couple months ago on this very topic, and a couple of the musicians were raising the same concern. The generative AI is not coming for real fandom. I think people have a hard time envisioning this technology and how it might expand the market. I think we are used to streaming and artists being a certain way, and then this new music is coming along and it's going to replace it. But no, we're creating a whole new thing. And I think the democratization of creativity is really good. And the other point to answer your question is that you've heard this argument throughout history.
Yeah, every phase.
When this polyphonic synth is a synthesizer that can play more than one note at once. And when it was used, it first became part of popular music in the late 1970s. The American Federation of Musicians literally tried to ban the synthesizer. And they claimed it was a robot and it wasn't real artistry and it was going to put musicians out of work. And that was not ancient history. That was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And now then Peter Gabriel used it and everyone's Peter Gabriel's using it, then it's totally fine. And now you can't hear a pop song these days that doesn't have a polyphonic synth in it. So, doing research for my book, I can give you so many examples, but I won't go into all of them. Plug for my book, read the book if you want to learn more. But
2026.
Yeah. But there's the idea that technology is going to kill human artistic endeavors. It's just an argument that's been made over and over and over again.
I want to ask you about that. Can you see a picture where the emerging technology that democratizes the creation of music leads to a larger music market, leads to more people creating, more people engaging in a way that actually builds the total addressable market of music?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we've had an interesting inflection point because up until now, when recorded music started in the 1930s, up until now, we've had the same dynamic where the thing that is valuable is the song. So as someone who ran an A&R team at Sony and then did A&R at Warner's, the writing and the recording process was a sunk cost. You tried to get to the song as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible, because then you had the song and you would monetize the song. And that how we monetized music has changed over the decades, but it's the same paradigm. Well, now we have this thing where millions of people are using generative AI and other emerging tech to make music, but the songs aren't valuable. Generative AI isn't eligible for publishing copyrights. First of all, that's something copyright offices around the world are pretty aligned on. Number two, no one wants that dumb song I made for my 5-year-old's birthday party. Like, it's just not going to have value. What does have value is the process. And that's something that's kind of been a new phenomenon in music. So I think there's an absolute huge opportunity for the music industry to monetize that process. And Media has done some great research on this, and they call them super fans, but people who really love music can engage with audio in a really interesting, cool way. And it's not replacing your favorite artist that you listen to on Spotify. It's something else. And it's a different thing. And I'm really excited about the tech. Not only is the tech cool, but I'm excited about the opportunity for general people to be creative and for there to be this new market.
I want to talk to you about music fans and listeners and the entire music business. But first, we have to talk about copyright and AI a little bit here. I don't know how to dive into it, but that's the other side of this is copyright at stake when large tech platforms are claiming fair use of scraping all the world's music and then creating sounds and music that could be competing or at the very least is violating copyright, depending on how the courts rule.
Yeah, right.
What are your thoughts on how this is emerging right now and where things will go with AI and copyright?
Well, I'm definitely excited to have an outcome because right now they think it's what, if you don't know anything about AI or music, but you work in music, you probably have heard the rumblings about copyright and lawsuits around training models on copyrighted IP. I'm excited to have an outcome. Once we have some business certainty around this, I think there's going to be a lot more capital flowing to the space. And I'm excited for that to be a reality. But we do need to answer the question, are you allowed to train an AI model on someone's protected works? And if you are, what happens to the output? And if that makes money? And if you're not, what happens to that when you make money? And I think I have a guess on where it's going to go based not only on just following this pretty closely, but what some of the things have been said and then some of the early court decisions that we've had, mostly around literature and books and not really any around music. But there's also I would just caution the industry that even if it is fair use to train a model on music, even if an generative AI platform can take the entire history of recorded music and train it on, and then it's fair use, it doesn't necessarily mean what you think it's going to mean. History is littered with unintended outcomes of things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be terrible for artists. I don't think we would choose that outcome, but there's a lot of uncertain things. And there's also a lot of reasons why a generative AI company would want to license the content, even if it is fair use. You talk to the guys at these companies, it's annoying to scraping the internet. The data's messy. It's missing metadata. Get a feed. And I think that's where it's headed. And I think what we've seen in these literature cases is that it's fair use to train the model, but how you get the information matters. And so I think it's going to be very convoluted, the answer. I don't think it's going to be as simple as black or white. It's fine or it's not. But I do think that we will at least have an outcome by the end of 2025 into 2026. And from there, we can just move forward and really kind of open up some capital and new markets around this.
Will be good to find out. When we started this conversation, you mentioned with the launch of ChatGPT, a lot of people are engaging with this, so there's just more awareness regardless of whether it's the music industry. But you also said that you sometimes advise folks about how they could be using AI. How's AI transforming? I mean, we talked about the composing and recording process, but how's AI transforming the rest of the music business?
Yeah, it's everywhere, right? So let's go through the value chain. You're a label or you're an independent artist and you have a song ready to release. Well, there are now at least 2 that I know of legal AI chatbots trained on music industry law. Now, I would not recommend anyone outsources their entire legal advice to a chatbot yet, but they can help. Right. And not only are independent labels using them, but so are independent artists. And then you have the annoying part of marketing, which when I was running an A&R team at Sony, I spent most of my time, sadly, yelling at artists to be on social media more. And that's not what anyone signs up for when they do A&R. But the reality is that's how you meet your audience. And as an aside, I love how we don't really respect the creation process enough. And we make artists be their own digital marketing people and get online. But the answer to that isn't let's just pause that and let artists be artists. The answer to that is let's use AI to make even more content and more slop. But for better or worse, that's how artists get discovered. So there's all different kinds of generative AI that can make your Spotify canvas, a lyric video, write SEO copy, write ad copy, and create content for your social medias. There's a lot of great social, for the music space, social media, calendar, platform generation, scheduling that can help manage that unwieldy, time-consuming process. And then there are a few companies that I really like that help you with streaming optimization. And there's a lot that's being done with catalog and deep catalog, everything from the avatars, the ABBA's Avatar and the ABBA Voyage, to revitalizing IP, to biopics, and a lot of interesting stuff being done with deep catalog and AI.
I just had a weird thought that I've never thought before, and I don't know why I didn't think it until now, but when you were talking about all the marketing AI slop that can be created, as well as the useful stuff, I was just remembering screensavers. Remember screensavers when everyone was trying to customize their computers?
Yeah. Wait, if I remember correctly, you needed a screensaver, right? Because like you didn't want the pixels on your monitor to freeze, it burn out.
Some privacy when you walk away from your desk. And when people went to offices.
Some artists out there should like take some of the popular like Windows screensavers and use it in their creative campaign.
Or vice versa. Maybe artists should be selling screensavers. With AI.
They're easy to make now.
Yeah. I would assume they'd be very easy. I don't know how to tell your computer what to do with it, but okay, we've got to take a quick break, but I do want to come back to this issue about how AI is impacting fans. We got into it a little bit. So when we come back, I'll ask you about that. We'll be right back.
Music Tectonics isn't just a conference. It's where the whole music ecosystem meets for meaningful connections in an open, welcoming environment. Day one will kick off with a keynote from Tatiana Cirasano of Media Research, followed by our creator fair, demos from our Narwhal startups, a creator keynote with Sides and Shure, and an opening party hosted by Topalti, all at the Carousel on the Santa Monica Pier. Day two will be packed full of cutting-edge exhibitors, insightful panels, our final pitch competition, and an evening pool party hosted by Stuff.io. Day three will kick off with coffee and croissants with Cosign, spend the early afternoon with programming presented by Yamaha Music Innovation, and then we'll head over to Universal Music's Santa Monica studios for a startup bootcamp and closing reception. What are you waiting for? Head over to musictectonics.com to secure your badge now.
Now back to the show.
Okay, Drew, this has been a blast. I kind of expected almost, since you said you teach master classes, I was sort of like picturing myself as a student in a class, but this has been a fabulous conversation, real dynamic. You've got me thinking about new ideas and so forth. I want to dig into how AI is impacting music fans and listeners. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's really kind of the interesting. I think of this three pillars, how it's the creation and writing and recording process for artists, how it affects industry, the business and rights holders. And the third pillar is how is it affecting fan listening and engagement? And I think that this is probably the most important one because this is really what's going to determine the other two. This is going to really inform where the money is and
what do people want.
Yeah, what are fan behaviors telling us? What do they want us to build? What do they want artists to be like? And I think we take it for granted that streaming is the way that we're all going to consume music, at least most people and like that, I wouldn't make that assumption necessarily.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like interesting ways that this tech is being applied. And I'll bring up Media again. I can't talk enough about how great Media is.
I love Media.
Their research is amazing. And they define a super fan as the top 20% of all music listeners. And there's a lot of data on how much these listeners like love just engaging with audio. And that this tech now is available to put this in their hands. Like, you love Beyonce? Well, now you can pull out the stems and just listen to each individual track and listen just to her voice. Or you're curious, you want to hear what Beyonce sounds like as reggae? Press your button and make it reggae. Or, fan fiction, like you could do mashups and remixes and, there's a lot to work out. So that's the fan behavior. Obviously, Beyonce in some level should have some say in how her music and IP is used, and the licensing and rights holders need to decide how much interaction fans are going to have with it. But I think we've learned through this UGC era and the social media era that relinquishing control over your music once you release it can be very powerful. And that's, anathema to me. My first A&R job and marketing job at Warner's, I was working at None Such, and I had David Byrne and the Black Keys and Wilco and Emmylou Harris and a lot of West African music and composers. And I just
remember that's when we met, Drew.
Yeah, that was and like I was taught like David Byrne worked really really hard to record this song. And we're going to release it the way he wants it. And we're not going to let anyone fuck with it. But that's not the era that Gen Z and millennials really expect. They really want to engage with this music. And if you relinquish control over it, some of the most viral moments have happened when someone sped up your song on TikTok and has created a whole new audience for you. So I'm really excited. And the rights holders are kind of open to this now. They're open to like letting fans. So I'm excited to see like what gets built in that space. And is it like fan fiction? Like what is it? And then a lesson that we've learned from AI is that sometimes tech takes a little while to mature. And I would say that's the same thing with the AR, VR mixed reality future, which I am a big, big believer in. And I think we're going to be living in a world where a lot of us are spending our entertainment in a virtual or augmented reality or mixed reality. And music is going to play a primary role in those environments. Kind of think about it as merging traditional music listening with gaming, especially when a lot of our time is freed up in the car and these AR, VR headsets get a lot more interactive. And I just think there's going to be a lot of interesting things that we're going to do with not only the consumer creator where people can make music in cool ways, but they can engage with their favorite artists in interesting ways. And then even like on the live side, there's a lot of interesting things happening with live, but both for everything from up from the stadium level down to the club level in terms of how much easier it's getting for fans to buy tickets and see who they want and how much better the data is getting with the touring artists at the club level. And it feels like this is all happening very quickly, and it's because it kind of is.
I like the optimism of all this, Drew. It's making me excited.
My thesis on AI is very optimistic. And I wouldn't have said that before I did my book research, but I just kept coming across these examples where like I opened my book with the story of like when the camera was invented, it was a common belief that it would kill painting. And it like actually invented impressionism. You can draw a straight line between portrait painters being freed up to explore other kinds. And there's so many examples of that. So I'm just a big believer in this actually opening doors.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you put the emphasis on creativity, there's like a pendulum or a spectrum of creativity and commerce. And sometimes maybe commerce swings the other way, but creativity increases. But then it swings back the other way because now that these creative categories have been created, there starts to be a way for fans to engage or audiences or patrons or whatever that becomes monetizable. Let's do a quick speed round. I have 2 questions for you that I thought we could just jump into real quick. I've got more questions than that as well. But you talked a little bit about as working in A&R at Warner, wearing your former record label hat, and you worked at Sony as well. How do you think labels are responding to AI, and how do you think they should be responding?
Yeah, I got to say I'm pretty optimistic there too. I think that no one in the industry wants to relive the file sharing days. And that was an example. I mean, could the industry have like bundled that any worse? So I don't see that with AI. I think the people that are running point at the 3 majors and some of the stuff that Merlin's doing and even some of the bigger indie labels, I think people are very like have their ear to the ground. They understand this tech. I think they have to be careful, but they're being careful. I think they're making smart investments when they need to. Of course, like especially if you're a major label, you have to worry about your clients, which are your artists. Sony, just from being an executive at Sony recently, like I know they would love to do a lot more, but you can't piss off Adele. And I don't think Adele is super necessarily on board with a lot of this AI tech. So you got to move slowly. But they've made some interesting investments. They've made some interesting partnerships. And I think the industry is managing this much better. And that's not to say that they haven't laid off a lot of people the last couple of years. They have. It's been a tough economic climate. But I think that the rights holders and the ecosystem and the artist community is going to be a lot stronger because I do think this is not being managed the way file sharing was managed. I think the industry started to get their relationship with technology a lot more right by embracing streaming. And I think I just see more learnings and they're going to manage this pretty well.
Oh, great. Okay. Same question for streaming services. How are they responding to AI? How do you think they should be since you worked at Pandora?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's less that they really need to worry about because they don't own IP. And I know that the DSPs would love to offer some of these tools to consumers. They want to be able to offer these kind of mix up, mash up, stem separation, but that requires licensing. I think that they can build the product pretty easily. They can build the tech pretty easily, but they need the licensing. And that's not going to happen until the rights holders are ready. And that's going to take a while. Spotify is releasing, we've been told, what they call a crossfade. It's thing is called Spotify Mix. It's basically just a crossfade feature where like a DJ feature where you can play one song on Spotify and then mix it directly into another song so it doesn't have any space in between. And there might be some like light beat matching there. Basically like a DJ feature. That's like the first step Spotify's making in having the user actually interact with audio a little bit more than just passive listening. But I think in the near future, we're going to have to start to see some of these tools built right into the DSP client where you're going to be able to do a lot more than just listening.
Okay, let's go back to the big context again. It appears that AI is going to be as transformative as, say, the internet or mobile computing. I'm curious, do you agree? Why or why not?
Yeah, I would say even bigger, right? Like certainly the internet. I mean, I've heard the analogy around electricity. I mean, that seems pretty apt, to be honest.
It's like the electricity of your brain.
Well, it's called a neural network for a reason. I mean, the way that AI works, it's this entire technology is built off Alan Turing's initial research is that you could classically compute something, but do it in a way that mimics the way neurons work in a brain. So it really is like a neural network for a reason. So I mean, it's going to be that disruptive. It really is. And I think I completely agree. I think the mobile transformation is only looking bigger and bigger as we get further away from the proliferation of smartphones. I think it took a while for the industry to be like, oh, that was actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
That gave us DSPs. And I don't know that we would have DSPs if the mobile revolution hadn't happened. But I think AI is like another magnitude bigger than that.
Yeah. Okay, now to come back to Earth, what are some practical AI use cases that will become used by most people in the coming few years? Since you wrote this book, you're looking at the music, but you're looking at the context beyond that too. I'll take either, whether it's music specific or just like what can we expect for all of us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the agentic AI is really about to be a lot more a big part of our lives. We really are in early days. And the idea that you go to a chatbot like ChatGPT or Anthropic or Claude and you say, give me a recipe for dinner. And it gives you a recipe for dinner. I think that's going to be seen as like very rudimentary very soon, because pretty soon you'll be like, give me a recipe for dinner, and it'll give you a recipe, and then it'll go to your shopping app and it'll fill out the cart for you, and then it'll order it, and then it'll schedule delivery. Before you know it, you'll have and then when robotics get into the picture, then it'll cook it for you. But that's another podcast conversation. But in a music context, there's still a barrier to using DAWs. There's still a barrier to using plugins and outboard gear. And that's something I struggle with as a musician. I'm not particularly technically minded, and I had trouble using gear that was made by engineers. But I can go to a DAW and I can say, hey, I really want my vocals to sound dreamy. And the copilot, the agentic copilot in my DAW will know that I want a short slapback delay and some reverb with sidechain compression. It'll go to my DAW and it'll do it. And I don't need to learn how to use a plugin. I don't need to troubleshoot any complicated tech. I don't need to upload or download any updates to my software. And I think we're just going to see more and more of those like hyper intelligent copilots. And that's the same thing with the music space. I mean, the digital marketing is about to be radically reformed with a lot of like automated processes for digital marketing.
Yeah, it's like your agentic marketer tells you everything you need for distribution and creates an editorial calendar for 6 months and produces all the content, the photos, the videos, the posts, and your agentic editor checks to make sure it meets all your criteria.
Yeah, and the EU AI Act, which is the world's most comprehensive AI legislation, does a pretty good job of spelling out what they called human in the loop. Where like the humans should stay centered in this process. You should not automate away all of this, but you can use these tools to replace some of the things that are tedious or kind of mind numbing or not particularly creative.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like right now, it feels like you need to keep the human component. Like anything you've done on a chatbot or any AI platform is super, super shitty and boring if you haven't looked at it and decided and tweaked it and really gotten it to what a human would want to see. I'm not just talking 6 fingers here or something like that. I'm talking, you can see it on LinkedIn. And you're just like, oh,
I know. Can we just not with the AI copy? It's like so clearly obvious to me when people are just using AI copy. There's a cadence to the way large language models, like the either or, and it's just like, can we just not?
In some ways, that's a good thing because then you know when humans are involved. You know what I mean? Like in a way, it's like you can feel the soul in writing. And I think it's going to be the same in music too. And at the very beginning of the podcast, you said something about it's not just the audio that people want to hear. There's more to it as well.
Yes.
But like you said, there are lots of use cases. I definitely would love it if I could get my meals suggested, purchased, and even made for me. That'd be awesome. I'd love that.
I know.
Okay, this has been an amazing overview. And like I said, I did not expect to go down so many rabbit holes. It's been really creative and really fun to have this conversation. Let's wrap up by asking you to go bananas, Drew. What is the craziest future of society and music look like with AI? When you think of your wildest imagination of where this is going to go, paint us a picture.
Okay, I have this like pretty bananas theory that actually seems kind of logical to me. But so one of the things that machine learning does really well with is taking like large, massive data sets and making sense of it. And one of the earliest uses was, and I'm going to get this research wrong, but someone in academia has recorded like every whale sound ever recorded on the planet. And they've crunched this data and they're like, oh, whales are actually talking to each other in a language that's a lot more like a human language than we realize. And they've noticed that some of the whales, when they sing, some of the other whales all shut up. I have a theory that not only are we going to be able to like communicate with using this really powerful, this might include, we might need to get to like the quantum computing, which is a little much more powerful computing. But I have a theory that we're going to be able to communicate with animals because we're able to just process this data, and that like we're going to discover like animals, they're like animal pop stars. I bet there's a whales like that other whales are like, oh yeah, that guy's songs are like awesome, or that girl's songs are awesome. And there's like, oh, shut up when you hear it because it's like beautiful. I honestly think that. I think that we're going to like discover that they're like animal pop stars, and that we're going to be able to, that honestly doesn't, maybe I spend too much time thinking about the future, but that doesn't seem too bananas to me.
No, actually, the way you say it, it doesn't sound banana. I'm like, that's not as bananas as I expected. But then when I think about it, I'm like, wait, are we actually talking about this? When I was a kid, I used to listen to Paul Winter, who was a soprano saxophone player in New York, but he did recordings with whales.
Yeah.
I think he integrated samples of
Yeah.
whales, but maybe he knew something we didn't.
Yeah, like there's probably a bird out there who's like the best bird as far as other birds are concerned, the best bird singer, and like they get a lot of attention when they open their beak or whatever. So, and I think we now have the computing power to be able to like really make sense of all that.
Amazing. Drew, what an amazing vision for how we can crunch all this data and be able to communicate across species and make music with whales. There's going to be a new super group of whales and birds together.
I just lost like every potential masterclass client with that one.
I don't think so. I think what you're saying is like there's so much data that we'll be able to parse. I mean, like animal language is something that we haven't, we've got the affection with pets that is a way of communication, et cetera, or some of the primal stuff, like there's a lion or a moose about to charge me, that's communication in some way.
Yeah, right.
About like at the deepest level. And it's a cool vision. All right, Drew, this has been a blast. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited to see your book when it comes out. I definitely have to read it now. I think there's probably some examples of transformations and disruptions from the past that I would love to know about, as well as kind of a vision for where things are going. Drew Thurlow, it's been a blast.
Thank you so much. And I'll see everyone at Music Tectonics in Santa Monica in early November.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dmitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.